Hey guys, welcome to the first ever Steveradamus podcast. My name is Stephen Chrisman and I'm the host of Steveradamus. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about this first episode because it's going to be different than a lot of other episodes. It's actually recorded after I've already recorded a lot of episodes. So for all those people out there who are friends and family or who have been guests on my show, I will release those podcasts at the right place and the right time. Today's podcast, we're doing from home. Basically, my studio, my office, my factory has been shut down to the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic that is going around the world right now. It's March 30th, 2020. My wife and I came up with this idea of her sort of hosting this podcast in a way. She's going to be asking questions and engaging me in conversation. And we haven't really thought of a name for this show, but if it goes well and if people out there are listening to it and liking it and leave positive or negative feedback for that matter, engaging feedback might be the right way to say it, then we're gonna continue down this path of making these podcasts every once in a while, along with the other podcasts that we have to release and the podcast we will record at future times to release. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my wife, Jennifer Chrisman. We've been together for about 19 years. I think a lot of you probably listening to this know that. Actually 18 years. And so there I go, being already bumbling my way through the first part with my wife. But she's going to, she's going to ask questions. I don't really know what the questions are. She's come up with a list of questions and I'm going to sort of respond. We don't know what we're going to call these episodes, but we think we're going to call them Mansplaining by Steveradamus, just to sort of make a joke about it. As we do a lot in our family, is we mansplain a lot, or better said, I mansplain as she rolls her eyes. But all is well. So without further ado, welcome to the first ever episode we're going to publish on steveradamus.com. And I hope you like it. If not, I apologize ahead of time and you never have to listen again. So my wife is going to tell us what section we're on. So there's going to be multiple sections in this podcast. And then she's going to ask the first question. So like I said, without further ado, let's go.
Good morning, Jennifer here. This is the first section and it's the what do you think section.
I think a lot of things.
The first question in the what do you think section is, what do you think is the most surprising reaction to the COVID-19 virus?
What do I think is the most surprising reaction to COVID-19? That could be individual reactions or societal reactions or anything?
Individual, societal, just kind of anything, a big general overarching umbrella.
With a caveat, I think there's a lot of things that have surprised me so far about society. Unfortunately, most have been somewhat depressing. But I think that I have two big things. And so I can answer the question, what is the one most surprising thing? It's the elephants in the room that we're not talking about as a society. The elephants in the room I'm referring to are how out of shape we are as a country and how fearful we are of death. Those are two elephants in the room that we're just not talking about as a culture, as a family, as a society, and they're shocking to me. And I'll start with how out of shape we are. So basically the coronavirus and the disease COVID-19 has clearly, the data has shown, is clearly attacking three subsets of the population: the elderly, the immunocompromised due to genetic disorder, and then people who are just out of shape. Is a way to say it. That doesn't mean that a healthy young marathoner, distance runner can't come down with the coronavirus. It doesn't mean that he can't have an adverse reaction. It just means that he's highly unlikely to do that, or she's highly unlikely to have that effect. That's just what the data says to this point in time. So of those three things I said of what the coronavirus is attacking, once again, age, genetic disorder, and the comorbidities that exist, two of those can't be controlled, right? Like you can't control your age and you can't control your genetic disorder. You're sort of born with those things. And they're going to be issues that you are going to constantly change and evolve. Like my age is evolving, my mom's age is evolving, your age is evolving, the listener's age is evolving. So we can't control that. We just sort of have to take society as it comes to us as we age, and we have to plan accordingly. And then the genetic disorder, like if you have lupus or Crohn's disease or something that autoimmune disease, you can't, I mean, that's just the deck of cards you were dealt with. And obviously the virus is attacking both of those subsets of our population. But the virus is also attacking people who've made poor choices when it comes to diet, lifestyle, habit. Are three big things that really jump out at me. And we're not talking about that at all. Like, I feel like a proper response by the federal government, state and local government should be, hey guys, we're at war here and we have to win millions of little battles. And those little battles are controlled by you, the individual. We need you arming up your immune system. We need you sleeping well. We need you eating well. We need you exercising. We need you getting sunlight. We need you to arm your immune system so that if you come into contact with the coronavirus, or you're unfortunate enough to come into contact with coronavirus, you're prepared to fight the disease. The most strategic point there is, which is your own immune system. And we're not talking about that at all. And we're also, it's just shocking to me that we're so terrified of death, or this is the message I see from society is, I'm terrified of death. I don't want to die. I'm terrified of death. We got to shut down society, blow up the economy, cancel school, just this response. But when you look at what kills Americans, diabetes, heart disease, I think that's 1.5 million Americans right there. And those are, for the most part, lifestyle choices. And we didn't care 6 months ago about that. We were eating processed foods and smoking cigarettes. And now all of a sudden we care because there's a virus that attacks us. It just doesn't make sense to me as a culture, as a society. And it doesn't make sense that we're not even talking about it now. Like, if we're so afraid of death as a society, why don't we just simply say, hey guys, if you do these activities, you're going to have a premature death. And that's just a fact. Same with the coronavirus. It's just a fact that if you get the coronavirus and you're type 2 diabetic, or you have cardiovascular disease, or you have both through your lifestyle choices, it's a fact that it's going to raise your risk factor to needing a hospital bed. And you see it a lot. Like, you see a lot of people that are 20 to 44 filling up hospital beds with an adverse reaction to COVID-19. And that adverse reaction is not necessarily directly correlated to the coronavirus. It's directly correlated to their lifestyle choices in the previous years, and thus encountering the coronavirus. And I think that's one of my biggest surprising factors, or my biggest surprises, is no one in society is talking about that, or if they are, it's on a low frequency radio. I just don't hear it. I don't hear it being discussed. I don't hear us, calling a spade, saying, hey, listen, we are fat, we are out of shape, we smoke too much, and we drink too much. And that's one of the main reasons we're having adverse effects to the coronavirus, including the one of being underslept. Our culture is completely underslept. We stay awake at night, staring at social media or cell phones or TVs, and we're getting 6 hours of sleep when we should get 8. That wreaks havoc on an immune system, just destroys an immune system. And so I'm just really surprised that we're not talking about immune systems. I think it would be the simple way of putting it. And the second one is death. So, guys, everyone out there listening, we're all going to die. I hate to break it to you. It's just a fact. We're all going to die. And we're just so underprepared for it as a culture. Like, we just sort of kick the can down the road, pretend it's not going to happen, and then as an aging population, because some of us do die from obviously car wrecks or suicides or gunshots or freak accidents or what have you, but most of us die of something that we can see coming, right? We can see the death train coming our way, and we know it's coming. It's either our age or our lifestyle choices or a combination thereof that are leading to a demise in our own health. And so we can see this train coming, and we just sort of pretend it doesn't exist. Like, we just sort of pretend that death is not real. And I think when you look at how we reacted to the coronavirus and our response to it, the fact that we're not prepared for death and we haven't discussed it as a culture or even as at a family level or an individual level, it's just like, holy shit, stop society, I don't want to die. Screw it. I don't care if people lose their jobs. I don't care if kids are freaked out. I don't care. Screw it. Everyone stay at home. I'm not ready to die. And I just think that that's just interesting. I don't know what the answer is. I just think it's one of my responsibilities in society to at least bring it up, to at least encourage listeners to have courage and go talk to their loved ones about either their own death or the death of the individual they love. Like if it's a parent listening, maybe talk to your child. If it's a child listening, maybe talk to your parent, just so that it's very clear and understood and discussed, so that when the time comes, we're not terrified of it. I think those are the two big things that surprised me the most. You know, our inability to talk about the elephant in the room of death, and our inability to talk about how out of shape we are as a country.
The second question we're going to address is, what do you think about people who blame China for COVID-19?
So I definitely got some friends out there, they know who they are, who want to blame China for COVID-19. And I think that's like an easy way out, right? It's another way of putting it is blaming McDonald's for being fat, right? Or blaming someone who's skinny for why you're fat. Is there a role that China played in this? Yes, in a very matter-of-fact way, there is a role that China played in this. The virus, I think most believe, was developed or came to fruition a Wuhan meat market. I haven't seen any credible evidence to say that that's not true. I've seen a lot of conspiracy theories to say that's not true, but I haven't seen any credible evidence to say that's not true. So let's just take that at its face value. But do I blame China for our response? Absolutely not. Do I blame China for our nation being out of shape? Absolutely not. Do I blame our inability to deal with death on China? Absolutely not. Do I blame our economic demise on China? Absolutely not. You have to remove the log from thy own eye before you remove thy speck from thy neighbor's. Basically, we have to look at what we can control and adjust accordingly and not worry about what others are doing. Is it unfortunate? Sure. Yeah, it's unfortunate that this virus developed. I think there's a lot of silver linings, and those silver linings will come to fruition in the coming weeks, months, years, and decades. But right now, we have to deal with what happened, and pointing blame at China doesn't solve the problem. And we have to own up to what is going to fix the problem, and that starts at the individual level, addressing issues in the individual's life and not really blaming China. When you blame China, you're just going to get angry, and getting angry is not going to resolve issues. Furthermore, it's a very real, if we isolate ourselves from China, I think the detriment could be far greater than the reward. Sure, if we isolate ourselves from China and say no more planes from China ever again, then yeah, okay. I doubt we'll drastically decrease the likelihood that another coronavirus 20 or coronavirus 21, comes from a meat market in their country or into our society. But with that said, cutting off that economic tie with China just is like two neighbors building a fence higher and higher, and two neighbors who usually build a fence end up at war. And we need to be very cognizant of that. And I think China needs to be cognizant of that too. Like, you don't want to F with the United States, but the United States doesn't want to F with China. We need to work on, forgiveness and not scapegoating, and addressing the issues that we can control as a society and worry less about their society. We need to work with China in the future, not just on the medicine front and controlling a pandemic, because another pandemic is coming. This is not some radical idea by Steveradamus, some radical prediction. Another pandemic is coming, I promise, and it could be a lot worse. So we'll need to work with China in that one as well as Europe and Africa and South America. So we need to keep that in mind. But ultimately, no, I don't blame China. When I have an issue in my life, let's say I'm overweight, or I'm drinking too much, or I'm not sleeping well, or I'm being a poor father, it's easy to blame you, or blame my kids, or blame, financial stress. But at the end of the day, I have to take responsibility for my actions as an individual. And I think that we as a society need to blame ourselves more than we need to blame China.
What do you think about the U.S. Fed's multi-trillion-dollar response in the form of a stimulus package?
Where do I begin? So for all the listeners out there, I want to simplify this, and I want to make it very clear what's happening economically in our nation. So the question is, what do I think about the Fed's multi-trillion-dollar response to the economic shutdown that was a direct correlation to the response of the coronavirus? Okay, so first of all, let's look at the economic shutdown. The economic shutdown happened because a privileged few in Washington, D.C., talked to a privileged few of their constituents and said, we're not ready to die. Let's blow up the economy. Basically, let's sacrifice the economy so we increase our likelihood of survival. What I'm getting at is there's a subset of our population that has most of the power. And that subset is the baby boomers. So the baby boomers have most of the power. I think the average age in the U.S. Senate is 70-something. Congress is 60-something. Obviously, Donald Trump is 73. His opponent in the next election, Joe Biden's 80. You know, this is a massive hold of power. Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, these are all baby boomers. And even at the state and local levels, you see some younger leaders, but it's mainly baby boomers. And then you look at what the baby boomers have, like their lifestyle. They don't have jobs, so for them to sacrifice a job is not a big deal. They have pension checks, so they get a set income from either Social Security or a state pension or a government pension on a monthly basis. And then last but not least, they own a majority of the stock market. My generation, the people who are probably listening to this, may hold some stocks, but they don't hold a majority. The majority of stocks are held by our parents' generation, the baby boomers. And baby boomers is like I think it's like 1942 to 65 or something like that. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I'm basically saying people 50, 55 and above. And that multi-trillion-dollar stimulus is to support them, not support us. Please keep in mind what happened. The older generation said, hey, we're not ready to die, and let's act accordingly to protect ourselves, which is we want to quarantine pretty much the entire planet, and we don't care if it costs you your job, costs your livelihood. We don't care if your kids have to stay home. We don't care if schools are shut down. That's not important to us. What's important to us is we survive. And then when they did that, they realized, oh shit, our lives depend on the economy, and our 401ks depend on the economy. And we just blew the economy up. So let's reinflate our 401ks. Let's create a 2 trillion, 3 trillion, 5 trillion. I think by the end of this year, we're going to have put another $5 trillion on the federal deficit, which is obviously going to go all to the top. It's going to go to the top corporations. It's going to go to the top companies, which are where they're traded on the stock exchanges. They're owned by who? The baby boomers. But who's going to have to pay that debt? It's my generation and our kids' generation. That's what happened. And to any baby boomer listening out there, if you're getting mad, then it's probably true. And you'll hear me say this a lot on other podcasts, is if I say something that makes you angry, it's probably true. And a little quick interest surplus, I was fat. I still am a little bit on the chubby side, but I was fat. And a friend of mine told me one day, he goes, hey, Steven, I hate to break it to you, but you're fat. And I'm like, nah, man, I'm just chubby. I'm just chubby. He's like, no, you're fat. And I was arguing with him, and he could see it, and he could see I was getting angry. And he was like, I just want you to know something. If you're getting angry, you know it's true. So in the same realm of that, baby boomers, if you're listening and you're angry at my response, you know it's true. What you basically did was, let's shut culture down, let's shut society down. We want to stay alive. We're not satisfied with a 95% survival rate. We want it to go to 97 or 98%. And then you basically said, oh crap, we blew up the economy. Our 401ks are tanking. Hey, Nancy Pelosi, hey, Mitch McConnell, get together, put $2 trillion in the stock market so our stock assets go back up. I don't really care if our kids pay for it. I don't really care if our grandkids pay for it. We want to go back to drinking Spanish wines and flying around the world. And so as a father of two and a loving husband who's not vested in the stock market, I'm just calling bullshit. That's what this stimulus package was complete and utter bullshit. And it was not thought through, and it was a privileged few making a decision for society as a whole. And I've talked to people who saw their stock portfolios increase by hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, and they're like, "Oh, but you're going to get a stimulus check." I'm like, okay, if my wife and I even accept these stimulus checks, which we're having moral issues accepting because we don't want our kids to pay them off, we might get $4,800. So here's a generation that is getting hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of stock asset value increase. We're getting $4,800. It's like, here, you can have the crumbs off my table. That's what this stimulus check is. And anyone out there who tells me it's not, they're lying. It's just that simple. That's exactly what the stimulus package is. This stimulus package is to support the people that sit around and drink California wines with Nancy Pelosi, or drink Kentucky bourbons with Mitch McConnell, or sit around boardrooms with Donald Trump. That's it. Fact, the end. There is no arguing with that. That is what it is. And that's what I think about the stimulus package. And like I said, I'm just calling BS on it. Period, the end. Next question.
I would say mic drop, but I don't want you to drop that mic. What experts would you like to speak to about this COVID-19, and what would you like to ask?
The question, what experts would I like to speak to about this COVID-19 coronavirus, and what questions would I ask?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know out there, I wanted to be a doctor for the longest period of time, and I actually, the first 3 years of my undergraduate degree, I was declared pre-med biology major. I ended up studying abroad in Spain and getting. I don't have very many skill sets, but one of them is linguistics, and so I got really good at Spanish. And I came back and I placed out of all these Spanish classes, and they gave me a bunch of credits, and I realized I can graduate in 4 years with a Spanish degree, and it's much easier than graduating with a medical degree. And then instead of going to medical school, several years later, I ended up going to law school, but that's neither here nor there. But I've always had a penchant for medicine. I've always understood it probably better than most. I'm not claiming that I'm a medical doctor. I'm not claiming that I'm giving medical advice. But I've been around it a lot. My family's been in it. My grandfather's in it. My uncles are in it. A lot of my friends and clients are in it. And I just ask questions and listen to podcasts all day, every day on medicine. The experts I want to talk to, and this might surprise a lot that are listening, are experts in the placebo-nocebo field. And a quick 30-second discourse is basically the placebo effect is, and the nocebo effects are effects that you feel because you think you should feel them, in a way. That's dumbing the definition down, but in a way, that's what it is. So, for example, if I give you a pill and I say this pill is gonna, make you run faster, you're probably gonna run faster. If I give you a pill and say this pill is gonna make you feel really slow, you're probably gonna be slower. And this has been proven time and time and time again in tens of thousands of experiments, I dare say, that are recorded that are statistically accurate, the placebo and nocebo effects. And so I'm definitely not an expert in that field, and I know there are people who are. And what I would want to ask them is how many people are being hospitalized because of the negative association with the coronavirus that the media has propagated, I guess is the right word, across society in a very, very concise and direct apocalyptic manner. Now, before I go any further, I want to make it very clear that coronavirus is real. The coronavirus has very dangerous symptoms when they begin to manifest themselves in the human body. And yes, people are dying, and yes, healthy people are dying. I think when we really flesh it out, I think it's probably about 1 in 5,000 healthy people die. That's a prediction. I'm not saying that it's accurate. I know the data says that much higher, but intrasurplus, I don't think the sample set is accurate of what we're claiming is the number of people that are exposed, and then using that as the fatality rate. But that's neither here nor there. Let's get back to placebo and nocebo. Basically, what the television, internet, social media says is, if you get the coronavirus, you're going to have trouble breathing. You're going to drown in your own fluids in your lungs. Look at how many people are dying in Italy. The numbers coming out of China are not real. It's a 10% mortality rate, et cetera, et cetera. So let's say the question would be like, if I were to go to someone and inject them with coronavirus, let's say I get 2,000 people and I take 1,000 people and I inject them with the coronavirus, and I tell them that it's an inoculation. I'm giving them a coronavirus inoculation, and it's not an inoculation. It's really the coronavirus. And you might have a few symptoms of discomfort and stuff, but you should be fine. Just drink a green tea, watch some Netflix, and relax. If symptoms get really bad, call me. And then the other 1,000 people I give and say, hey guys, unfortunately, we've chosen you to die. Society has chosen you to go, and you're going to be sacrificed for society. We need to study the coronavirus, and we're going to be injecting you with the coronavirus. And you know what? You're probably going to, die. It's going to suck. It's going to be miserable. Your life is going to end. Okay? If I take those two groups of people and I inject them with the same amount of the coronavirus, I can guarantee you that more people would die in the group that we said that we basically preached apocalyptic outcomes to, and less people would die in the group that we did not preach apocalyptic outcomes to, and we said we were actually doing them a favor. Now, what would that delta be? What would that difference be? I don't know. I can guarantee you it's at least one. And that's what I would want to ask experts, is I would want to say, how people who are currently in the hospital, how many of them are there because they're actually experiencing panic attacks, anxiety attacks, and the coronavirus is really they're not necessarily to be there. They just believe it's necessary to believe there. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh my God, you're downplaying the coronavirus. No, I'm fucking not. Hear me. This is a real disease. It will kill people. It is going to kill more people. Their fatalities will be high. But how high are they in comparison to how they could have been, how high they could have been had we treated it differently? Had we just had the message like, hey guys, this is dangerous. If you're elderly, you need to stay at home. If you have, complicating risk factors, you need to stay at home. If you're young, you'll probably survive this. The likelihood's up there with a car wreck when it comes to fatality. If you do come in contact with it, just strengthen your immune system. Take your zinc, take your vitamin C, take your supplements, drink your green teas, relax, try to stay calm. And if it gets really, really bad, come to the hospital. I don't know. I don't know if that would have saved more lives than what we're currently going through. I definitely don't think it would have devastated the economy as much. Do I think the media needs to be muzzled? As most of you know, I sort of tend on the side of liberty and the First Amendment. So no, the media does not need to be muzzled. Does the media need to think long and hard about how they could have possibly exacerbated, this pandemic? Yeah, they do. They really need to look themselves in the mirror and ask the question: was the increase in ratings on their TV shows and the increase in Google AdSense revenue, was it worth the message they were spreading? I don't know. I mean, that's questions for Dr. Sanjay Gupta and Anderson Cooper and Sean Hannity and Rachel Maddow. They need to look themselves in the mirror and ask that. And they might look themselves in the mirror and say, hey, you know what? I feel like I did the right thing, spreading this message. And I sleep good at night. And some of them might look at themselves in the mirror and be like, you know what? This could have been handled better. And that's all I'm saying is I want to get with a doctor or doctors. I want to get with 10, world-renowned experts and talk about how much of a factor this was, because this is theoretical medicine, right? Like, we can't really go inoculate people or inject people with the coronavirus, and we obviously can't create placebo effects in animals. I mean, maybe we could. I haven't really thought about that too much, but we can't go to rats and be like, don't worry about this, you're gonna be just fine, or don't worry, rats, you're gonna all die. Like, I mean, we can't transmit that message, but that message is very powerful. The human brain is extraordinarily powerful, and we can manifest symptoms to be, a much stronger reaction than need be, and we can manifest symptoms to be a much weaker reaction than need be. And I think that the media storm created it. With that said, one caveat, and if you're out there and you're a placebo, nocebo expert, I encourage you guys to study subsets of U.S. culture, trying to keep the control group as accurate as possible, and compare, say, a county in Florida or a county in North Carolina or a county in Colorado to, say, New York City, and especially if the subsets of age, demographics, are similar, because obviously the virus could be currently could be spreading rampant in Denver, Colorado, or Wake County or Mecklenburg County, and the people there just don't know it, or they think it's not. And if they think it's not, then they might not be having adverse reactions. So, for example, let's say there's 1 million people in Wake County. That's where I live. And there's 1 million people in, some parts of Westchester, New York. People in Westchester, New York know it's running rampant. People in Wake County believe it's not running rampant. Let's say the subset of demographics, average age, average, shape, the average, what level we're in shape, quote unquote, what level our immune systems are at. And let's say that that when we do a serological study, which we'll be doing over the next several years, which is basically see how many people were exposed to the coronavirus. Let's say that Westchester County is 81% and Wake County is 77%. And let's say that Wake County had 30 deaths and Westchester County had 3,000. I think a lot of that difference can be explained due to the belief that the virus is here, the belief that the virus is powerful, the belief that I'm going to die if I encounter it. So anyways, I'll get off my soapbox. I hope that all made sense to anyone listening. I haven't really fleshed that answer out of my head, but there you go.
Summing up the response questions, what do you think about the state and federal government's responses, as well as how that ties into this sort of notion of a privileged response?
I would say the federal government's response is abhorrent. I mean, it's just terrible. It's just pathetic at very, very many levels. But but with that said, I'm not surprised. People who are surprised at how terrible the federal government's response is, I would say you haven't really been paying attention to the federal government over the last 20 years, even maybe further back, last 50 years. The federal government basically works for a very small minority of the United States. And it's to keep that very small minority protected and financed, flush with cash. And that's what their response was. They didn't think about the middle class people out there. They didn't think about the lower class people out there that live paycheck to paycheck. They didn't think about the kids out there that are practically immune to this. They didn't think about the 15-year-olds, the 20-year-olds, the 25-year-olds, the 30-year-olds, the 35-year-olds who've made healthy decisions that are practically immune to this disease. I'm not saying that I can't die from it. I'm saying it's very, very unlikely. I'm saying it's more likely I'll die in a car wreck, texting some person about the coronavirus later today. Mom, I'm not saying I text and drive, by the way. I don't. Well, that's a lie. I sometimes do. But yeah, so I think it was mismanaged from the beginning. I think the messaging has been all over the place. I think that governors and states are not at the same level. It's just, it was a terrible response, and I'm not surprised. And the response is to protect the privileged few among society. It was not a consensus. And, like I've said, if the average age of the Senate was 38 and the average age of Congress was 35, there would have been a totally different response to this. If the average age of the Senate or the average individual in the Senate was not vested in the stock market, there would have been a totally different response to this. And that's the majority of Americans. The majority of Americans are not 85 years old. The majority of Americans are not invested in the stock market. This response was to protect 85-year-olds or the elderly, quote unquote, and to make sure that they have their wealth. And that's what the response was. It's just that simple. And if I have one message to baby boomers, you need to look yourself in the mirrors and you need to say to yourselves, I told my kids I'd do anything for them. Just admit to yourself it's not a true statement. You saying I'd do anything for my grandkids, admit to yourself that's not a true statement. Just own it. Own it. Own it. Just say, hey guys, I thank you so much for destroying the lives of the middle class and the lower middle class. I appreciate you guys taking on a $5 trillion deficit, and I'm going to now work my ass off, even though I'm retired, to help rebuild this economy, to participate in this economy, to do what I can, to make sacrifices I can, because you guys have sacrificed a lot. For me, the least I can do is sacrifice something back for you. And to people out there in my age group and who are in my shoes, for those who don't know, my wife and I built a company for the last 15 years, and it was completely devastated. We sell social gathering products. So, of course, our business was completely devastated, and our lives have been turned upside down. But we need to forgive. We need to forgive our parents and our parents' generations, the quote unquote baby boomers, so that we can move past this. But we shouldn't forget it. We shouldn't forget what's happened, and we shouldn't forget that most of the stimulus was just crumbs off the table for the many, protecting the wealth of the few. Like, just don't forget that, America. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you, honey. Moving on to the next section.
Mansplaining 101.
I didn't say it. Moving on to the next section. We're going to take it a step further. I'm having a hard time deciding which I want to narrow it down to. You gave a lot of really good information, but I think we'll move back to section the first question, where we talked about the most surprising reaction to...
Sorry, I'm just making sure the mics are working. Yep, we're good.
We're moving back to the most surprising reactions to COVID-19, and I think I have 3 questions I'd like you to answer in a bit more detail. When you spoke about our being out of shape and our fear of death in the United States in general, how do you think we can solve this? And closely related, what role do you think stress plays into that?
Bringing in the stress. Okay, so how do I think we can solve the issue of how out of shape we are as a nation, solve the issue of our fear of death, and what role stress plays in both of those? Wow. Okay. That could be a podcast in its own right. How do we solve it? Step 1, communicate. We have to communicate about how out of shape we are as a nation and how fearful of death we are. We have to look each other in the eyes and say, I don't feel comfortable with death, and admit it, own it, and then work towards a solution. And I think the solution is individually based. I think sometimes it's going to be religion. Sometimes it's going to be meditation. Sometimes it's going to be acceptance of the unknown. I think some of it's going to be literature. Some of it's going to be movies. I think there's a lot of ways in which we can accept it. But then first and foremost is we have to sit down with our elderly and have a conversation and let them know that they're not going to be forgotten and that we appreciate them for what they've done, and that we'll always remember them and they'll always be with us. And I don't want to start crying here on my first ever podcast, but I've had these conversations with my parents, and my parents know that. My parents and I, as my dad says, we've probably talked about death and the reality of it more than 99.99999% of the population. And they know I love them, and I know they love me, and they know I'll never forget them, and they know that their values they taught me, such as courage, like the courage to go on the interwebs and share what I'm about to say, or share what I am saying, is one of the principles I'll have with me for the rest of my life, and my kids will have, and that will live on, not just our family name, but who we are as people. And they need to feel comfortable that they did a good job raising us, and that they can go rest easy on their deathbed and cross that great divide without fear that they left behind the unknown, but with the truth that they know what they've left behind, I think. And that just, we have to start communicating. We just have to start talking about this as a culture. We have to talk about death. Death, 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 death. Say the words with me. Say it. Death. We have to talk about it. When it comes to being out of shape, my dad, perfect example of my dad talking to me and leaving behind teachings. My dad was very much a tough love type of father. And I think right now, as a nation, the number one thing we can do is tough love with people who are out of shape, and call a spade a spade. The truth hurts. Like my buddy, who told me, like, Steven, you're fat. It was true at that point in time. I was, and now I say I'm just chubby on my way to being skinny, or just chubby on my way to being healthy. I don't think skinny necessarily means healthy. But yeah, I think that we need to call spades a spade, and we need to let people know that if they make a decision that they know or they should know is detrimental to their health, we can't always be there to bail them out as a society. And I know that's tough for people to say, and it's tough to grapple with, like social medicine and that type of theoretical aspect on how society should work. But we don't have enough hospital beds for everyone in the United States. We don't have Mayo clinics and Harvard medical institutions and Stanford medical institutions for everyone. We don't have cutting medicine for everyone. That's just a utopian reality that does not exist. There will always be haves and have-nots in society. I think the problem that I have is that we have a sick care system that's basically, for every ill there is a pill. And I think that's one of the reasons we're terrified of coronavirus is there's no pill to fix it. There's no pill to fix. I mean, we have pills to fix everything. You got high blood pressure here, take this. You have high cholesterol here, take this. You have diabetes here, take this. It's just literally, you have depression here, take this. You can't get an erection here, take this. You have low testosterone here, take this. And the coronavirus, there's no here, take this. It's just, hey, it's you and your immune system, guys. And so I think we just got to call spades a spade and communicate and just let people know that here is what a healthy lifestyle looks like. Here's what an unhealthy lifestyle looks like. If you choose an unhealthy lifestyle, that's your First Amendment right. But it's also society's First Amendment right not to treat you. And that's really simplifying it down. And of course, we're like, well, what about the person who's born with this or that? Like, I get it. There are people out there that are less fortunate, 100%. And we as a society have to respect them. But it's a lot easier to respect them than people who made decisions and now have become less fortunate. So I'll just leave it at that. And then what was the last part of that question?
How does stress play into all of that?
All right. When you asked the question earlier about what doctors I'd want to talk to, and I said placebo and nocebo theoretical medicine experts, right behind that would be people who are adrenal experts, the endocrinologists that really understand how the adrenal gland works, cortisol works, stress hormones work. Because right now, I can tell you, everyone in the United States, I don't care who you are, everyone. I don't care if you're the number one triathlete in the world. I don't care if you're the greatest doctor in the world and you can run 100 miles and you hadn't eaten a carb in 20 years and you have a six-pack abs. Everyone in the United States right now has a weaker immune system because their adrenal gland and cortisol levels and their stress levels are through the roof. Period. The end. Unless you've been living under a rock or you're Buddha out meditating in the desert, that's a fact. To what degree is debatable and subjective. But I think if you were to talk to doctors who really understood the endocrinological makeup of the human body and understood how we respond to stress or how we're supposed to respond to stress, and use stress as a benefit, not as a detriment, they would all say that we basically, busted our nut before we had sex kind of thing. And what I mean by that is everyone's jacked up on adrenaline right now. Everyone's jacked up on cortisol and all the stress hormones because we're mentally fighting a disease that possibly has not even entered our bodies. And that's unnatural. Like in the past, like if they're like an ape doesn't know they're going to contract a virus. An ape just contracts the virus, and then its body starts to respond. A dolphin doesn't know that it's going to contract a bacteria. It just contracts it and responds. An elephant, any type of mammal, probably even reptiles, don't know that they're going to be challenged. Their bodies just begin to fight when they do get challenged. And that response is normal. And that's what allows us, one of the things that it helps us survive. Well, what's happened in humanity over the last, 30, 60, 90 days is we've started to fight a virus that our bodies may not have. And thus we've begun to tax our immune systems before we actually needed our immune systems. So you need your immune system and you need the stress-related strength of your immune system when the virus enters your body, not before the virus enters your body. And there's something called adrenal fatigue where basically your body is exhausted from dealing with stress. And your hormones are out of whack. And that's what we are right now. We have an underslept society that just got a lot worse as people are staying up, reading articles and sharing information, doomsday apocalyptic news with each other. And your stress hormones are through the roof. And, 2 weeks later, you don't have any, adrenaline left to fight this. You don't have any cortisol left to fight this. Your body is just worn out because it's thought it's already fought it. I mean, you have to keep in mind, like, literally for millions or billions of years, we've evolved to not know a virus was coming, but just to encounter the virus. And now all of a sudden we start to fight the fight before we did, but before we even have the virus, or may never have the virus. And I think that's a crying shame. So, like I said, I'm not a doctor. I'm not an expert. I do like theoretical medicine. I would love to talk to an expert about this and just get their opinion. But one thing I can tell you is the human body needs to have its hormonal balance, and it needs to be able to respond. And stress is not necessarily a bad thing. It's something that helps us survive. And try hard not to stress. I know that's easier said than done when you have money issues and family issues, and your 2-year-old and 4-year-old and 6-year-old are, destroying your house, and you don't know how you're going to buy groceries in a month. I get it. That's stressful. I really do. But just try to take a deep breath and relax, and know that if you do get the coronavirus, odds are you have a 97, 98, 99% survival rate based off the data we have today. I think when the data comes out and all the serological studies come out, it's actually going to have been a much, 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 much higher. So just rest assured that you can survive this, and just focus on other things. And one of those things you need to focus on is not being stressed. Meditate, music, laugh, hug, watch funny movies. All of these things will help lower your stress hormones. And exercise, sunshine, hot baths. I mean, all these things will help. And like I said, this is a war against a virus, and everyone has to fight their battles. And the number one thing you can do as an individual is stay out of hospital beds. And the best way to stay out of a hospital bed is protect your immune system. Mic drop.
I'm going to finish up this section with one more opinion-based question, and that is why don't we care? Why on a daily basis don't we care more about the shape that we're in, our immune system, our stress responses? You mentioned earlier that all of a sudden that COVID-19 is a real and dangerous threat, that now all of a sudden we're very worried about death. But why don't we care more as a society on a daily basis?
Simple answer. Our culture is rotten. We basically, when we introduced screens to society, this is my theoretical take on this. By the way, when we introduced screens to society, we introduced a reality that wasn't in front of us. And I don't think we fully understood what that meant. So basically, for millions and billions of years, we evolved to only believe what we saw. That was the reality, what was in front of us. And then all of a sudden we said, hey, here's a screen, and you can be transported anywhere. And guys, I'm not saying I don't use screens. I'm not saying screens can't be helpful. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is we don't fully understand the power of screens. And so the TV came about, and, silent movies, I think, in the early 1900s. And then I guess radio is inviting someone into your home, but screens control both sound and visual effects. And I think that's much more powerful. And that became a massive distraction. And then obviously over the last 20 years with smartphones and internet and laptops, screens have become so much more prevalent, and the aspects. Like, I was just in New York with you, honey, in Thanksgiving, and I couldn't believe the number of people pushing strollers with iPads for a 6-month-old. Like, a 6-month-old doesn't even need to be distracted by a screen. They're literally just distracting the child who doesn't even need to be distracted. The child needs to be asleep or observing sights and sounds and expanding its horizons. And that's a rotten, terrible culture. Terrible. Like, 500 years, 1,000 years from now, people are going to be able to look back at our society and sort of how we look back and laugh at, the Romans who had a demise because they were using lead in their aqueducts and, basically rotting their brains with lead, or, they were incestual to keep the bloodline, and we laugh at them like, I can't believe, Prince Harry slept with his sister, Princess Margaret. Yeah, you're right. I can't believe that either. Dude, I can't believe the Romans would drink lead. Ha ha ha. Isn't that funny? Well, I guarantee you 1,000 years from now, they're going to be like, these freaking idiots sat around and polluted their mind with screens all day and then wondered what the hell happened. And they couldn't even figure it out. And I think our culture is ultimately, it's a very sick culture right now. And we need to have a revelation, a revolution. I don't know what to say, but we need to reorganize our priorities, but we're so distracted by screens. I don't know how that's possible right now. We're so incredibly distracted by screens. Screens. Everywhere you look, it's screens. We can't even have a conversation without having screens, and it's only going to get worse. We're going to have this, I see like these companies like Zoom and Skype, and they're going through the roof because everyone has to telecommute right now. Right. And how are we going to have a revolution about how powerful screens are in our culture and how it's possibly more dangerous than helpful, or at least we don't recognize the dangers, might be the right way of saying it, if all we're doing is using screens. So that's why I think it's hard for us to talk about death. That's why I think it's hard for us to worry about our health, is because we're distracted. We're just simply distracted by screens. I don't have another mic to drop.
He dropped all the mics we have now. What predictions do you have in the short term, let's say 6 months, and long term, let's say 5-10 years from now? What do you think, what kind of effect do you think this pandemic is going to have on us?
All right, grab a pen and paper. Everyone can hold me to it. I'm someone who loves making predictions. I think that's part of where the nomenclature Steveradamus comes from. It's a mixture of Stephen with Nostradamus, the quatrain writer, a French philosopher, I believe it was, that makes predictions, and everyone's like, oh, look, he predicted the World Trade Centers and this and that. He was nothing special, and I'm nothing special, and people who make predictions are nothing special. They're just like arriving at logical conclusions. That's all I do, is I just take logical data sets and then I just try to sparse out conclusions. I think that what's going to happen in the next short term is there's going to be two camps of people. Camp one is going to be like, look, the coronavirus wasn't that bad. And look, we blew up the economy and, brought wreaking and havoc to, suicide rates and to depression and to child abuse. And we did all these things and it was unnecessary. Look, the coronavirus wasn't that dangerous. Serologically speaking, it was, the risk factor of death was 1 in 3,000. That's the same as a car wreck or whatever. You're going to have a camp of people that are going to be like, this is way overblown. And that's probably going to be more, my age group. And younger, up until I would say the 50s. And then you're going to have an age group like, look, social distancing worked. We saved the planet. Look, yay, rah, rah, world. We separated and we created social distancing. And that's why the death rate wasn't that bad and stuff like that. And guys, keep in mind that this is subjective, right? Like if 200,000 people die, a lot of people think that's a big number. A lot of people think it's a small number. Like, it's all in comparison, right? And I want to point out, for example, like the swine flu. The swine flu took place in 2009, and the intra-surplus here, by the way. And while we were living the moment of swine flu, you can go back and you can look at, reputable news sources that were saying the death rate was, 2%, 3%, 30%, all over the place. Several years later, 2012, 2013, 2014, reputable government agencies, reputable private institutions did serological studies, and they determined that roughly 2 billion people were exposed to swine flu and roughly 200,000 died. That's a 0.02% death rate, or 1 in 5,000, I think, or something like that, or 1 in 10,000. I'm definitely off on the math, and anyone who wants to correct me and post it to my website or post it to the YouTube channel, please do. But it was basically millions of times safer than, not millions, but it was definitely a lot safer than what we originally thought it was. And I obviously got a little off subject on that. What was I talking about?
Your prediction.
Oh, my prediction. So I think that I'm predicting that. I'm predicting that when we look back on this, it's not going to be as deadly as we thought it was. And also, I think that we get out a comparison. Like, I think the media is doing a great disservice. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but the media has like a scoreboard where it's like total number of infected cases and total number of deaths. Like, it's a freaking scoreboard. Like, literally, it's a scoreboard. I mean, do they have a scoreboard for broken hips? You know, for people out there, roughly 300,000 seniors in the United States break their hip each year. And then, you know, in a short period of time thereafter, their demise is written in stone. You know, actually, two of my good friends that I was, you know, bantering with, both of their grandfathers died recently of broken hips. 100,000 Americans have a direct correlation of death and broken hips within like 3 months, 6 months. So do we tell seniors to stop walking? Do we stop visiting seniors because we might trip them? I think it's like 40,000 Americans die in car wrecks each year. Do we tell people to stop driving? So unless this death rate gets into the tens of millions globally, and I would say several million in the United States, I would say that it wasn't as bad as it could have been, or it wasn't as bad as pandemically speaking. When I think of like pandemic, like the bubonic plague, the Black Death, you know, where a third of the world's population in Europe died. So I think that ultimately, when we look back on this, my prediction is it's not going to be as bad as we thought it was. And I think you're going to have two camps, and those two camps are going to separate out, and there's going to be a lot of anger between those two camps. And that anger is going to lead to a revolution in politics. That's what I'm predicting. There's going to be a revolution in politics. You're going to see a lot younger people who lost everything getting involved in politics, a lot younger people having social discourse, you know, and I think you're going to see an older population. I don't want to say they're remorseful. I don't even think they need to be remorseful, but I think they're going to be like, man, look at what we did, you know, and it was our responsibility to, you know, be the leaders of society. And obviously I don't think they led very well. Now, will they ever admit that? I don't know. But yeah, I think so. Short term, like, I don't like to do scoreboard predictions. I find it disgusting watching the media have scoreboards of death rates. But I think ultimately it's going to be similar to what happened with the swine flu. And I think ultimately you're going to have two camps separate. You know, I think it's going to take a while for the economy to recover. These people are like, let's just, you know, call a 20-second timeout. Let's have a halftime with the economy. That's not how this works, guys. It's not like, hey, let's just have a halftime and then, you know, next week, next month, you know, we'll just resume the economy and it'll be like nothing ever happened. That's just not how this works. And that's not how economies work. It's going to take probably several years for us to fully recover. And I don't know if we're ever going to be able to recover financially as a nation. I think we're going to have to sort of just accept hyperinflation, and I don't know what we're going to do with the bond and stock markets. I mean, the bond markets, like the debt, the treasury notes that we have. I mean, we just took don't quote me on this, but we're basically going to go from a $21 trillion deficit to like a $26 trillion deficit in the span of next 6 months. And if you have to keep in mind too, it's all in relation to your gross domestic product. That's what defines solvency. Like if me, Steven, the individual, has $1 million in debts, oh my God, that's so much money. Unless my revenue is $10 million a year, then it's not that much money. And we have to you always need to look at the ratio of your gross domestic product and your debt, because that's what's going to allow you to be able to pay that back. So don't let people scare you with big numbers. And the same goes with you know, the fatality rate of the coronavirus. Like, oh my goodness, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 people died. In comparison to what? Keep in mind, guys, annually in the United States, roughly there's 3 million people die annually in the United States. 3 million. I would bet good money to anyone out there listening that in the year 2020, in comparison to 2019 and 2021, we are not that far off, graphically speaking, of how many deaths occurred in this calendar year. I just don't think we're going to be that far off. I don't think it's going to be like, you know, 3 million in 2019, 6 million in 2020, 3 million in 2021. I think it's going to be 3 million in 2019, 3 million and a little bit more, just because there are a little bit more people, and 3 million and a little bit more in 2021, and 3 million and a little bit more in 2022. Like, it's going to be a natural growth rate of death. So there are some predictions for you with regards to like money. I think there is going to be a slow growth rate in the U.S. economy as people are just sort of fed up with what happened, and they're just going to say, listen, I'm going to live more within my means. I just don't care as much about wealth. I don't feel like working that much harder. I don't feel like increasing my net worth that much more. And I think that there's a silver lining for you, honey. You always ask me for like, my wife is always like, don't focus on the negative, focus on the positive. And I think there's a silver lining for you that I think people are going to be like, hey, let me have a conversation about death. Hey, let me read this book. Hey, let me better myself as an individual. Hey, let me learn not to stress that much. Hey, let me take care of my immune system. So I think we're going to see a healthier culture out of this as a silver lining. Are there enough predictions or you want more?
I think those are good. I wrote them all down. Hold you to him.
All right. Thank you. Please do. All right. Please do.
All right. Last section, just to end on a positive note, lighten the mood a little bit here. I have 10 questions for you. They range from the wonderful to the ridiculous. You have no more than 30 seconds to answer each question.
All right, this sounds fun.
All right, hold on.
Mansplaining has come to an end, everyone. Now it's my wife grills me on stupid shit.
All right, I'm going to start my timer right now. Ready, and here we go. Your favorite non-work activity?
Playing golf.
Your favorite whole food?
Right now, pecans. I love pecans. Salted pecans.
Those Trader Joe's are good. The best trip you've ever taken?
Probably my honeymoon with you.
Good one. The place you most want to visit?
We just got back from Thailand. I would love to go back to Thailand. Visit, I would say, if it was just you, I'd love to head to the Dominican Republic. If it was with the kids, I would love to take them on a safari.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Probably making a big splash in the lake that we call society.
What is your current favorite word?
Scalable or process? One of those two words. If I had to go with one, I would say process. Or train. No, you know what? Screw it. Train. I train, not try. Train.
Your favorite color?
The verb, not noun. Like I don't really care that much for boxcar trains like my sons do. I'm talking about like train your mind, train your body. And
clarification. What's your favorite color?
Favorite color? So I'm daltonic, which basically means I have pretty bad color blindness. My favorite pattern of colors would probably be some form of like exotic camouflage, but my favorite color is probably right now orange maybe. I like orange.
3 words that describe you. Only 3.
Loud. That was a joke, guys. Loud, empathetic, courageous.
One thing you feel grateful for today.
This time with you.
Ooh, another, knocking it out of the park. And the last, one thing that you feel humbled by.
I guess the financial devastation that just occurred to our family has humbled me.
That's it. That's your 10 questions.
All right, guys. So I hope you enjoyed this first podcast. We're just going to upload it in its rawest format. So this is unedited. For a lot of those out there, the podcasts that I have, my goal is to just publish them, basically unedited. I think that you just sort of have to deal with the pauses and the ums and the coughs and the burps and the sneezes and just sort of, this is a conversation between 2 people, and that's what podcasts are. Feel free to listen to other episodes. If you were offended, I would apologize, but I'm definitely going to put a notice on my website. This is not for those who are easily offended, so I'm not apologizing if you were offended. You shouldn't have listened. You should have listened to the note. Please note, I think one thing is, and I'm going to leave this, is everyone out there, I'm sending you positive energy, and I'm sending you big hugs and a lot of love. I'm a very empathetic individual, and I love our society, and I love our lives, and I look forward to making our lives better together in the coming weeks, months, and years and decades. So God bless you guys. Love you guys very much, and thanks for listening.